Hello folks, my name is Chase Coop. I am a woodshop teacher and I'm here to talk to you about tool safety. Today's tool, the planer. So what's the name of this tool? This is called the planer. And then you might be asking, well, what does the planer do? Good question. The planer has a job of taking your material and dimensioning it. So say you've ripped something on the table saw and it's a little bit longer or a little bit wider than it needs to be. Maybe a bunch of pieces for a cutting board. What the planer can do for you is you take all those pieces and you run them through together and it cleans up that edge for you that was on the table saw. Maybe there's that saw kerf you might see. And then you can also just slowly creep down to the number that you want. And so it dimensions your lumber. And so you can do it where your piece is on edge and it actually can dimension your lumber to width for things like a cutting board that might happen frequently. Or once you've put your cutting board together and all the faces are up and down, the planer is a great tool for making all those seams that you put together get flushed out, and it can cut down layers off the face, small increments at a time, and then make your surfaces parallel to one another and look great. So that's the job of the planer. All right, before we get going on using the planer here, I'm going to zoom you in, and we're going to take a look at some of the parts of the tool. All right, so here we go. We got our planer here. This is a jet model, which I believe a number of the shops have. And the things that you really need to know about any planer are pretty much the same as what I'll detail here. They may be found in different locations. All right? So right here we have the on-off switches, the green on, the red off. All right? And that should be pretty standard for most machines. So make sure that you don't have anything underneath this when you turn that on, all right? That's going to be something I'll talk about in a second as well. So you have your on-off switch. Right here, these handy little things, these are rollers, and they're called return rollers. The reason they're called return rollers is because you can set your material on them after you've caught your material that has come out the back, set them on there and roll them back, especially if you're working in teams. It's just kind of a nice feature so that you're not actually hitting the tool, you're hitting the rollers. You got your return rollers. Then you have right here, this is called your in-feed table, which means it's where the material goes in. You will know that it is the in-feed side because it will be on the same side as the on-off switch. You do not want to feed this through the wrong direction. And I'll talk to you about the dust port in a second. If you put the material in from the dust port side, you're going to have some big issues. All right, so in-feed table, we got our rollers, we got our on-off switch. Right here, this is your depth adjustment handle. So you'll spin this wheel and it will cause your in-feed and out-feed table together to come either up and make your dimension smaller, or it can go down when you go counterclockwise and the table lowers so that your material is thicker or wider. All right? Right here, we're talking about this area as the cutter head area, and that is because that's where the blades are. All right, you have blades behind here, and you do not want to ever have your hands go underneath the cutter head. All right, whether it's on or off, just a bad idea to have them there. And then what's visible to you right now, you also can see these. These are your column locks. So column, why is it a column lock? Well, this planer is set on some columns, and it will lock it in place. So if you ever have a specific measurement you need to do, and you need to do it over and over again, and you don't want anyone to mess with it, you can lock these, and it will keep that measurement for as long as you have it before you unlock them. All right, now I'm going to switch over here. As I said before, most planers, hopefully yours, has a hose attached to it that connects to a vacuum system, and so this is your dust port, and we'll talk about also not part of the tool, but part of the system, is hopefully somewhere on here you might have a blast gate. If not, you will have to actually turn on the vacuum system either way and make sure that that's on when you use this tool. Okay? And, oh, right here, I talked about it briefly, but this is the out feed table, the place you take your material out. All right, one last thing, and I have to zoom in for this. Right here, this is your measurement scale, all right? The depth of cut scale, it might be called. And so you'll see that as I crank that handle, the measurement changes either up or down depending on which way you spin it. Okay? All right, before you use this tool, there's something very important that you need to do. You need to find out how thick your material is. So, for me, I did not make a cutting board. I'm making a jig, and I glued these pieces together, but I need them to be flat so that when my router runs over it, everything goes well, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to first measure your material, and you're going to try and find the thickest point of your material. So this is kind of hard to see, but this middle piece, it's a little bit further down here than the rest, so I'm going to measure that. Okay, it's a little over 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to check a few other places. This is all pretty standard, but if you had a section that was a lot larger than the rest, that is the number you're going to go to. You got to make sure you go to the largest number when you do this. So, now that I know I'm 3/4 of an inch, I'm going to set this to 3/4 of an inch. And it's important that we set it to that dimension first. It may be that when you do your first pass through, it doesn't cut much off, and that's okay. We want to slowly creep up on this so that we don't overdo it and cause the machine to have troubles or your material to break. All right, so we've got our measurement set. We have our piece ready. Now, what do you need to know about putting this material through? Well, tell you what. First, this is pretty obvious with a piece like this. You need to make sure that the grain is going directly into, so your line should be going right into the planer. If you have a small piece, okay, this is a piece of walnut. Now, it's a strange piece because the width is longer than the length. And that's a tricky concept, I know. But if you wanted to go plane this piece and you tried to put it in this way, where the grain direction is this way, and you're feeding it in this way, that's going to cause the blades on that cutter head to tear your material out pretty well. So especially with cutting boards, you just got done doing all your work, glued it up, everything. If you put it in sideways, where the grain direction is running this way, then you're going to have some bummer news at the end of that cut, probably. You'll likely have some tear out, and it will be a lot of work to kind of clean that up. So always make sure the grain direction is going that way. And so we also want to make sure we put this material in straight, right? Because if we put it in sideways, that's fine if it's a pretty small piece, but if it's long, it might start running into this edge here, and I've had students who get caught up on this, or even hits here, and it causes some issues, all right? Okay, students, a small little trick I want you to know about in regards to the planer. If you see here, the grain lines on this actually come out of the wood right here. And so what you need to almost think of is those grain being like the hairs on a dog, okay? So if I'm here and I'm petting that dog and the hair's going this way, I don't want to go against the grain of the hair of the dog, or it'll just kind of feel funny. I do it sometimes. But most of the time when you go to pet a dog, if the hairs are going this way, you pet it that way as well. Well, guess what? We're going to have the planer do the same thing. So if your lines are going this direction, you want the planer, you want to feed it this way. So you want the grain coming out like this. The reason for that is the cutter head is rotating and it's cutting the material away. It's scooping it with the blade. Now, if it's scooping it and it's just shaving off little bits, it's great. But if we were to turn this the other way and run it through this way, it would be pulling against those hairs and causing your wood to break out and make little divots all over the place. So grain direction is important, not just that the lines go this way through the planer, but that the lines go this direction. They go out towards the back of your material. Not a huge issue if you're taking off a lot of material. You can run a piece through, and then if you kind of forget this trick, just look at your material. If you see little chips out of it, then you need to spin your material around and cut it from the other direction. All right? Small tip. You know how to kind of set up the tool and get it ready. Now that we're just about ready to start, one more thing, you want to make sure you have your glasses, okay? We're going to turn on the vacuum system, and then I'm going to show you, I'm going to explain a few things. You're going to hear and listen and watch how these work. There it goes, the vacuum's kicked on. This particular unit doesn't have a blast gate, but if yours does, make sure you open the blast gate at this stage. All right? And now we're going to go ahead and operate the machine. I personally like protection, so here we go. First pass is good, but there's still some areas where it does not pass the fingernail test. I'll tell you more about that in a second. So you saw me run the machine. We did the during use part. After you use the tool, I want to ask that you make sure you always turn off the tool. Number one, important thing to do with any of your tools. Make sure it's turned off, and then also make sure you turn off the vacuum system unless you have a line of people behind you and other people will use it. So make sure, or the blast gate is closed off. If it's a full vacuum system and other people are using other machines, don't worry about turning off the vacuum, but make sure the blast gate is closed so they get better suction other places. All right, now I want to talk also about some things that you might have seen, and to talk to you again about things that you should never do when using the planer. Number two, please don't adjust the wheel while your material is going through. For one, it's going to give you a variety of thicknesses on your material, and number two, it's just not good practice. Okay, so if you put your material through, it doesn't seem to be cutting, don't worry, let it come all the way out, then adjust the tool and put it back through. Finally, reminder, never put your hands under the cutter head, please. All right, important things that you need to remember. Grain direction, grain direction, grain direction, okay? Make sure you're going in the right direction with the grain, and also try and remember that little hint I gave you about the dog hair and heading in the right direction, okay? If for some reason your material gets stuck underneath here, I recommend you raise the blade, turn off the machine, and then wait until the machine stops. And then please, even if you have material under here, don't put your hands under the cutter head. If you need to, take another stick and push your material out, something of that nature. But please don't put your hands under there. Just try and get the stick out, and then reset and try again. Okay. Please don't take off too much material at a time. If you noticed, while I was running my material, I ran it through, and then I just did about a quarter turn on the wheel. So, quarter turn gets you to about a 32nd of an inch. A half turn would get you a 16th, which depending on your material might just be fine. But please don't do full turns or 2 turns. That's just way too much material. It's not going to be good for the machine or your project. All right. And finally, important thing to remember is the planer only cuts up here, so the top face of your board. When you get done planing one side and you see it smooth, that's time to flip it and get the other side if it's something that requires smooth sides on both sides. All right? This is a fantastic tool. It's going to help you on a lot of projects, certainly on your cutting boards, but it has a lot of variety to it, and we use this all the time. So I hope you enjoy. Good luck on the planer.